Exiles. Welcome to a video showcasing my max block ice crash Gladiator in 3.13 Ritual League. I say showcase because building or crafting the items that I'm about to show in this build may not be possible outside of Harvest, and well, it would be possible, but it's very hard and very unlikely to obtain them. So take this as a showcase rather than a build guide, but I will be posting some budget versions or accessible items versions in the description below, as well as a min-max version for those who are interested. So without further ado, this is my character. He is currently 96 and with sitting at a comfortable 6000 HP, and he also has 80% attack block and spell block, and that is without a Rumi's Concoction Flask and without getting hit or using Tempest Shield, which is super nice without having to rely on another mechanic to retrieve max block. And to do so, we have some block from our shield, our chest piece with crafted block chance, and using the new Brimstone Treads, which gives us a 5% implicit. On the downside is you take the 20% of damage from blocked hits, but that's okay since our shield is recovering 5% of our life when we block. As you may have noticed, that we are also sitting at a comfortable 50 rage in our hideout, and that is because we're using the Keystone Chainbreaker that comes from the Timeless Jewel Lethal Pride with the mod Akoya. And Chainbreaker makes it so that we regenerate 3 rage per second, and the increases or reductions to mana regen gets applied to the rage regen instead. We also lose 5 rage per hit, not once every 0.3 seconds, but that's okay since our ice crash does not hit that quickly. And because we're using the Chainbreaker Keystone, we're speccing a little bit into mana regen from our gear. So there's 70 from here, 90 from here, as well as the 70% increased mana regen when we cast a spell recently, Enchant. And since Dash is our movement skill, since Dash is a spell, we almost have always 70% regen. And because we're using Chainbreaker, we'll be using Berserk to get an additional 20% more damage with attacks, 19% less damage taken, and 20% more attack speed, as well as 30% more movement speed, which is nice for mapping as well as for bossing. And as you can see, with the mana regen from our gear, we have a very long uptime of Berserk. And once it ticks down, it starts regenerating, and once we get to 50 rage, our Berserk will be up again. That is not planned, but it is super nice to have. So let's go over the rest of the skill tree here. Like I said before, we are a Gladiator, which is a duelist, and we took the Arena Challenger for the Challenger charges, and at max stacks we get 20% more attack and movement speed, and then we went for Pain Forge for the attack block, as well as not being stunned when we block. And then we have Versatile Combatant, which applies our attack block to our spell block, which is super nice. And then we have Violent Retaliation last, which give us plus 4% to maximum chance to block. Yeah, you may have noticed that instead of 79 we have 80, and I'll go over that in a sec. And this also gives us some physical damage whenever we block. Since we are slow hitting, War Cries are very nice for this build, so I went with the Cold Arms Keystone since I really don't like standing in War Crying, and I bounded Seismic Cry to my movement button so I can have almost 100% uptime for Seismic Cry. And for War Cries, you obviously would try to get cooldown recovery rates, and I took Natural Authority so that enemies that I taunt with my war cries take 5% increased damage, and they are debilitated for 1 second, which means they deal 10% less damage to me. And then the other war cry node that I took was escalation, so that every time I war cry, I recover 10% of my life. And so that's basically a small life boost every 4.5 seconds. Yeah, the rest of the tree is just life, some crit nodes, some jewel sockets, some block chants, reduced mana cost of skills, which is pretty important later on, and yeah, clusters. So since we're not using fortify support, there's a cluster notable called overload in the scepters cluster jewel, and that provides us with fortify for 6 seconds whenever we hit an enemy with a mace, scepter, or staff, which we are using a scepter. And then we have Feed the Fury for the life leech. Since this build does not travel over here for the life leech, this is very nice to have. And then we have two with almost the same mods. They both have the same notables: Precise Commander and Vengeful Commander. Precise Commander is crit strike chance and crit strike multi, and Vengeful Commander just boosts up our hatred aura. And then lastly we have a small jewel. This is a life jewel, but if you're lacking attack block, you can also go for a attack block jewel, and with rote reinforcement, which gives us a little bit of life, attack block, and 20% chance to gain an endurance charge when we block. We basically have all 3 of our endurance charges up at all times. And then this is totally optional. We have a Unnatural Instinct, which is a pretty expensive jewel, and this here in this slot gives us so many benefits. We have the most important ones are the attack block, so it gives us 6% attack block, some resistances, totem stuff, melee damage, and skill effect duration. Yeah, and the rare other jewel slots are just the life and crit multi jewels. All of them are basically the same. Those can get pretty expensive, so just if you're starting this out, just get max life and maybe just 1 crit multi and you'll be just fine. For our gear, since we are using scepters, we're obviously going to go for the highest DPS, which is the Carnal Scepter. And we have this one here, which I bought with the 2 tier 1 fizzes with a tier 2 attack speed, which I fixed with Harvest, and then multi-modded for his can't be evaded and crit strike chance with quality. The quality would increase the base physical damage of the scepter, which is a nice damage boost. And then we have our helmet, which has the enchant 15% of Ice Crash physical damage gained as extra cold. I would say this is a very important enchant, but again, if you can't afford it or can't find one, it's totally optional. So this one in particular is a Redeemer and Warlords based. It has life, mana regen, Fizz taken as fire for defensive layer, and nearby enemies have -9 to cold resist. This took a while to make, especially when I accidentally re-rolled this using a life reforge instead of remove add, and so I had to restart that from scratch, and that took a while. I forgot to mention that if you cannot afford or find a scepter that has 300 DPS or above, this one has 525. You can go for a Doriani's Catalyst until then, and these are pretty cheap early in the league. And this also gives Life Leech too, which is a nice plus. But since this does not have hits can't be evaded, you're going to have to use it with Lycosidae, which you can equip at a level 11. So if you do manage to find a scepter with his can't be evaded, you can use the Surrender as a budget shield, since it gives us 250 life when we block. If you have 5k life and you block with 5%, that's equivalent to 250. Anything more, just go for a rare shield with recover life on block. This shield in particular is my prized possession of this league, since it took me many exalts to get the life recovered on block with this, since there are a lot of life mods even for suffixes on a strength shield. This is providing us with 37% block chance, and all it is just life, block, life recovered when on block, and crafted cold damage as extra chaos. And the chaos resistance is an added bonus. Next we have the amulet, which is a turquoise amulet. This build is actually starved for dex and int, so I used catalyst to boost up the attributes, and I essence spammed the critical strike chance to get the 32 attributes, and then crafted on the rest, which is life, cold pen, and fizz damage taken as extra cold. You don't actually need the cold pen. I accidentally got that when I was removing and adding cold, so it's a nice plus. But the gain fizz as extra cold I would say is a must. And then I crafted on mana regen, just because it'll be nice with Chainbreaker. We have our chess piece, which is a Warlords and Hunter influenced Astral Plate, and we chose these two influences because of the socket attacks have minus 15 to total cost from the Warlords, and attacks have plus 1.47, which goes up to 1.5 to critical strike chance, which is pretty nice for a crit based build. And the rest is life, resist, in this case a chaos resist, and fizz damage taken as fire, which is also a Warlord's mod. And make sure you have an open prefix to craft on chance to block attack damage as well. And then for our rings, we have 2 steel rings. You can totally use opal rings, and I believe they do give a little bit more DPS, and so yeah, this one was essence spammed with mana regen essences for mana regen, but all this is giving us is life, mana regen, resistances, and we were able to slam fizz damage to attacks, and then an open prefix for the craft. Non-channeling skills have mana cost, a certain mana cost, which you get from the betrayal. The other ring is a shaped ring. It doesn't have to be a steel ring, but make sure it's shaped, and you want the trigger level 12 or level 8 or level 12 as census mark when you hit a rare or unique enemy. The rest of the mods are life, resistances, and an open prefix for, again, the minus mana cost to skills. Yeah, for our gloves, these are a double elevated set of gloves, spec gloves, for the intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on hit, and the block chance and maximum block chance. And that is how we get to 80% instead of the usual 79%. And the rest of the mods are life and resistances, and I crafted on some AoE. And the plus 1 to 8 socketed AoE also benefits the Hatred aura as well, and some skitter bots. And then for our belt, we have actually, going back to the gloves, there are some alternatives that you can use, some of which are rares with life and resist. This one has cold res, the temple mod with cold res and increased damage with hits against chilled enemies. If you can't find something like this, you can also use the lightning variant, which is increased critical strike chance against shocked enemies. And we are shocking from skitterbots, which I'll go over later. And then we have Hands of the High Templar, and if you can find a well corrupted, well rolled Templar gloves, those will be good as well. I actually crafted these myself and it didn't break miraculously. And the mods are pretty good, so I ended up using this until I was able to craft the spike gloves here. Another alternative would be the Oscarm for the Ascensus mark on hit, a little bit of life, and spell dodge. Since we don't have any accuracy in this build, the increased attack critical strike chance does not really apply here. Another alternative that I don't have would be Tomb Fist, and if you socket a murderous side jewel in it, you can intimidate enemies on hit, which would forego the intimidate mod on these gloves. And then for a belt, we have a Resource coil with life, flat fizz, and the maximum and minimum physical damage mods, which means is our physical damage range would get increased, the highest get higher and the lowest get lower. And if we hit hard, we're going to hit hard, but if we roll badly and we hit low, we're going to hit pretty low. It's pretty swingy, as you can see in some of the clips that I provided. So you can sometimes one-shot bosses, sometimes you can't. It's just a bit of RNG there. But overall, this is a great damage boost to our build. You can totally replace this with a Stygian Vise, a rare belt, or the Belt of the Deceiver, which is actually a very nice belt, and you can use this starting at level 20 as well. And it gives you life, resistances, and nearby enemies are intimidated, and also global fizz damage. Okay, then we have a new base from this league called the Brimstone Treads, and this is what helps us greatly to reach max block with minimum investment in our passive points to spec into damage. And this makes it so that we have 5% plus 5% chance to block attacks, and we take 20% of the damage we blocked, which is like a baby version of glancing blows, but I think it's a lot better for Gladiator instead of taking glancing blows. And then the rest of the mods is life, resist, movement speed, and because this is a Redeemer influence base, we crafted on Fizz to gain 8% of Fizz as extra cold, and the 10% chance to dodge spells is a nice bonus. Yeah, well, I missed the helmets alternatives. You can use an Abyssus, of course, for attributes, flat Fizz, melee critical strike chance, or multi rather, but we also take a lot of Fizz damage, so it's nice early game when you don't really care about dying, but once you get late game, you would definitely want a rare helmet instead. The other alternative, if you don't like using the Abysses, would be a Starkandras, which would give us a lot of life and a lot of dex as well, and a little bit of attack speed and crit chance. An alternative for the amulet is a Pandemonius, which would give you cold pen against chilled enemies, as well as blind enemies on hit, which is a 50% chance to evade attack, which is a very nice defensive layer there. Oh yeah, and then we have the anointment called for Command of Steel. And Command of Steel, what it does is give us increased damage per 1% chance to block attack damage. So since we have 80% here, that is 80% increased damage. It also gives us a bit of attack block to help us get max block. If you can't afford this, or if this is not giving you enough block chance, you can go for Testudo, which gives us 5% instead of 3%, and you also get 20 life when you block as well. So yeah, for our flask we're using a Divine, Diamond, and Quicksilver for our magic flasks, and for our rares we're using a Bottle of Faith for the critical strike chance, the flat critical strike chance on Consecrated Ground, as well as a Lion's Roar. This is optional if you can't afford it, and you can replace this with a Wise Oak or a Taste of Hate. For bossing, I would replace my Quicksilver with the Taste of Hate for more damage. and as a good defensive layer since we take some fizz damage as cold during the flask effect, and we also gain 20 of our fizz as extra cold. Okay, so that's the gear, and on to the gem links. Our main 6 link is our Ice Crash, of course, and it is linked to 3 awakened gems, which are melee physical damage, cold penetration, elemental with attacks, and the two others are Pulverize and Fist of War. Fist of War you can totally replace with Ruthless, which I believe would give you more DPS for bossing and mapping in general, but I use Fist of War because it's nice to one-tap mobs while mapping. You definitely do not need to go Anomalous Pulverize, which gives us more AoE, since the default Pulverize gives us more damage. We have a lot of reduced mana costs on our equipment and in our tree with the Tireless, and that makes it so that our Ice Crash costs 0, so we don't need to rely on any mana leech or mana regen. If you are struggling with getting an open prefix on your rings for the minus mana cost, you can totally use a Divergent Elemental Damage, which I have been using. In our helmet we have Dash, and Seismic Cry, which is our War Cry, and Frostbomb, which is all linked to Second Wind support. Second Wind support lets us have 2 Frostbombs, so in case you miss one and then the boss moves, you can quickly place another where the boss teleported to. For Seismic Cry, this is the best War Cry that we can use. I believe the other War Cry that we can use would be Intimidating Cry, but Seismic Cry has more DPS and it gives us more AoE as well. Yeah, and then we have our cast when damage taken support setup, which is connected to level 4 Immortal Call, so which is also linked to increased duration, which is optional as well. Immortal Call makes it so that when it procs, we take 26% less elemental damage and 27% less physical damage. It also gives us 15% less physical damage per endurance charge removed, and since we're using 3, it would give us another 45% less physical damage taken when it's up. For our 3 link here, we have both the Ancestral Protector and Ancestral War Chief totems, which are connected to multiple totems so that we can have both of them active at the same time. And you typically use this for a tanky rare or a boss. In our gloves we have our mana reservation setup. We have Hatred, we have Summon Skitterbots, which is connected to Divergent Bone Chill, and then we have Blood and Sand over here, since we can't fit it here. And these are linked to level 4 Enlightened support. Once you hit these mana cost rings, you do not need a level 4, level 3 would suffice. We're using a Divergent Bone Chill because our Skitterbots would chill and shock our enemies for a flat 10 and 15, and since Summon Skitterbots also has the tags 20% increased chill effect and shock effect, that goes up to 12 and 17 respectively. A Divergent Bone Chill makes it so that any effective chill causes the chilled enemy to take increased cold damage. So yeah, since our Skitterbots are always chilling, it increases, this bone chill effect would increase our chill effect from 10 to 17 in total. So that's a 17% increase cold damage taken, and another 17% increased damage taken from shock. So this, I would say, it's not necessary, but it is definitely nice to have when you want to reach endgame. We're using Blood and Sand, which is 100% mandatory because we need a stance for our challenger charges from our ascendancy here. And the only way to get a stance is to use one of the stance skills, and the best stance skills to use is the Blood and Sand for increased area damage or increased AoE in either Blood or Sand stance. So just make sure you switch to Blood stance when you boss for more damage. And I totally forget most of the time, so yeah, just make sure you don't forget. We have our last 3 link, which is our Berserk and Blood Rage, which is both connected to enhanced support to increase their qualities, and increasing the quality of Blood Rage, which give us a little bit more attack speed, and a lot of attack damage for Berserk. You can see that it went from 20% increased attack to 44% increased attack. The reason why I didn't 4-link this is so that the mana reservation for Blood and Sand does not go up and reserve even more mana. So make sure this is a 3-link and Blood and Sand is solo. So yeah, that is the build. And yeah, this was mainly an experiment. See if I can get my own theory crafting from PoE and take it all the way through the end game. And I would say this is a great success for that. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but this is a very slow mapper and it's not a very good boss killer. Even if I've shown you the clips in the beginning, there are much better boss killing builds out there, such as Akane's Miner or Cast on Crit or other meta builds. So I would definitely check those out if you're more interested in one-shotting bosses within like 1 second or something. So if you're not interested in that and want to try something different, I would recommend this build. It's pretty fun and it's a little hard to get used to because of the slower attack speed, but that also all comes down to improving your mechanics and positioning. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll leave you with some clips with this build taking on other contents of the game. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, please leave them down below and I'll try my best to answer as many as I can. Yeah, until then, have a good day.